Right?
Everybody ready?
I know, right?
I'd like to call the Lawrenceburg Redevelopment Commission work session to order, May 29th, 2019. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Brian Messmore.
Here.
Chairman Mel Davis.
Here.
Vice Chairman Randy Abner.
Here.
Secretary Kevin Schaefer.
Here.
Member Owen Cross.
Here.
Member Paul Seymour Sr.
Present.
School Board Member Brian Johnson is absent, and City Attorney Del Weldon.
Here.
Before we get into the meat of the meeting, we have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. When we decided that Steele would get the property at 300 Margaret, we forgot to take an official vote.
Right.
So all in favor of letting Steele Construction have the property at 300 Margaret Street for a house,
For $100.
need a motion.
For $100.
Yeah.
Gotta get that in there. All right. Anybody make that?
I wasn't here, but I'll make that motion. We go ahead and
Okay.
proceed.
Okay.
on
Second.
this deal.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. First order of business is Rizzo Engineering, 124 Short Street, Firehouse Agreement.
Good evening, Mike Rizzo, Rizzo Engineering. I've got Anthony Smart here with me as well, representing us. My apologies, do I need to start over?
No. you're
Okay. So I'm here tonight to continue the discussions and hopefully proceed with the next path forward on the 124 Short Street, the old firehouse property. And I know we don't need to go into the back detail, I don't think, because we've been here for quite a few months and are trying to move forward. I'm a little bit at a loss right now just because we just received the latest draft and we were kind of sitting and going through it just got it a few minutes ago. So at this point, I need some direction on how we're going to proceed tonight so I can understand.
Well, the way we would like to proceed, Mike, is for you to agree to everything on the contract, and we could vote yes or no.
And then we're all good?
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got two agreements tonight to go over if it pleases the commission. These were agreements that I drafted. I sent one version over to the Rezzos and Tony Stroud on Friday so they could look at them over the Memorial Day weekend. And both these agreements have a lot of similarities. They do have some differences. So we'll kind of start with the similarities. These are development agreements, obviously, for the commercial property that surrounds the park, that's adjacent to the park and kind of touches and concerns the park. As you all know, we, as a commission and as a city, targeted those properties a couple years ago and decided that these properties were important and worth investing in. We bought the Union Hall, we bought the firehouse, and we bought the two row houses. We also bought property from Jimmy Thomas and Johnny Scudder, and those properties were demoed and are now vacant lots. And if you throw in what we call the burn down lot, we've got a couple vacant lots, and we've got a couple historic properties that are really ripe for commercial development. And the concept has kind of been traditionally commercial retail on the first floor, whether it's a retail store or a restaurant, commercial business perhaps on the second floor, office space, and then condominiums or private dwellings on the third floor if it's a 3-floor building, or on the second floor, obviously it's a 2-story building. So these agreements, as they're drafted, they're just draft agreements. We don't have any formal agreements between the parties. We're still kind of in a discussion phase, but these represent kind of the culmination of those individual projects, everything that the Redevelopment Commission has discussed over the last 3.5 years, everything that we've kind of experienced, good and bad, everything we've learned, good and bad, and really the history of downtown commercial development in the city of Lawrenceburg. And quite frankly, the city of Lawrenceburg has made a lot of bad choices that we can learn from, and that's a good thing. When you learn from your mistakes when you don't repeat your mistakes. And the mistakes that the city has made in the past in regard to commercial development is really kind of dealing and negotiating from a position of weakness or desperation rather than a position of strength. And when Mayor Milan took office and Director Messmore and you guys as a redevelopment commission were seated over 3 years ago, it was the focus of not just redevelopment, but the city of Lawrenceburg to build a city infrastructure that would allow us to capitalize on a position of strength rather than a position of weakness, rather than forcing a square peg into a round hole. We've had a lot of projects, as you know, that were well-intended and thought to be good at the time, but that created a lot of commercial businesses that opened and closed right away. You know, we were kind of just trying to get anything we could going. We threw a lot of money at a lot of projects that didn't turn out so good. And again, that's a positive thing because we can learn from that, and we won't do that again. And so that's a difference, because as we sit here now, we sit here with the value of everyone who's come before us and sat in these seats before us, and the knowledge and the ability to learn from what they've done. And the other advantage that we have that no other redevelopment commission has ever had is this wonderful, growing, thriving, living and breathing city that everyone in this room has been a part of creating. And the city park, this beautiful addition that will be a generational game changer to the city of Lawrenceburg. It opens this weekend. The Flaherty and Collins apartment complex is getting ready to break ground. Downtown with the lights and the speakers and the events, and you think about the car show and just the energy that's downtown. It's palpable and it's priceless, and the energy downtown is what we as an administration have focused on creating, because we believe very, very strongly that if you build that, then not only will commercial businesses come here and want to come here on their own volition, but they'll be successful, they'll be sustainable. We won't have businesses open for 6 months and close. We won't have businesses that we fund 100% of, because we don't have to do that anymore. We've built a downtown in Lawrenceburg as a whole, not just downtown, but Ludlow Hill, Route 50. And I think the best example of success that we can also learn from is the Kroger Plaza project. And you take the Kroger Plaza project and you think about, well, why was that project a success? Well, first and foremost, we retained control over every aspect of that project, from the parking lot to the lights to the signage to what businesses specifically went in, all the way down to the tiles and the colors. We were asked to pick them out, and the entire deal revolved around, we're going to pick the right businesses, we're going to have final say in what goes in there, and if you don't do exactly what we have agreed to, you don't get paid. And in fact, we haven't given them a penny yet, and they've built. We had a hiccup, and that
we took care of that.
Well, and Mr. Abner, I would argue to you that the only reason we were able to fix that hiccup, and the only reason we don't still have that IGA there, is because you as a commission cut a good deal that protected you. You cut a deal on the front end that allowed you to retain control, to keep control over what happened in that plaza, so that when a business went in that wasn't a good fit, that was problematic, we were able to get that business out, replace it with another business. While we won't always have 100% control, we can keep a vast degree of control, because control is what we get out of this deal, right? We get the ability to say, well, here's what we want in these properties, and we want a certain general idea of a restaurant and what kind of hours they would keep and what kind of cuisine they would serve, and are they smoking or non-smoking, are they family friendly, and the reason that's so important is because they're part of the park. These properties especially are a part of the park, and that's the most important thing. That's the only reason that really, frankly, the local city government became involved in these properties, because we recognize that, okay, whatever happens to these properties, we want to have a say in it. We as a community Just like building the park with our park committee, everyone had a say in how that park was created. The park is a reflection of everyone who lives here and what what they represent, and the park represents all of us because of that. And so these agreements reflect that. They reflect the ability for the business owner. Here we have a kind of a unique situation. We're not dealing directly with a restaurateur. We're dealing with middlemen. We're dealing with people who will maintain and manage the property and then sublease that to a restaurant, or sublease that to an office, commercial space, or sublease that to individual, maybe residential renters. And we want all of that to happen. We want that to flourish. So not only do these agreements set that framework in place and allow that to happen, but they allow this period of time where those businesses have a chance to get off the ground, kind of hit the ground running. They're good deals for both sides. You know, as I sit here, I represent you as a commission, and as your attorney, I represent the most conservative viewpoint in the room. I think that's kind of my job, is to say, okay, what, I think attorneys by nature just say what could go wrong and how can we plan for that, and then you hope that everything goes well, and kind of plan for the worst and hope for the best. So these agreements reflect that. If you look specifically at, we can start with the Reso agreement, obviously. Yes, sir, Your Honor.
What? Okay. Let me ask you guys a question.
Probably, I'm just gonna see what that was.
Let me ask you all a question.
Yes, sir.
I know you just got the agreements. Would you like to go through them article by article, or is there a specific area you want to focus?
Well, I mean, I don't think that would be a bad idea if you want to do that, Anthony, but just the reason I brought it up is, having just read through it on the third paragraph of my agreement, we're talking about row houses, so obviously there's an error. So I didn't know if we're planning on, getting to the point where we're voting tonight, then we probably have to go through.
Did you get a new agreement, Mike?
What? Yeah, this is the one that you just printed, right? This is, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So if you want to go
Kelly,
through,
would you give him
The
a
one
new
that you just
copy?
gave us, right? Because that should be the newest of the new, right? The one she's got.
Well, what I would say, Your Honor, is that, so the draft, these are drafts. They're marked as drafts of agreements, but what you'll notice is that they make reference to exhibits. Exhibit A for both of these agreements will be the project specifications, and we still need those project specifications
understand.
before we can agree to anything. So
Well,
what I would ask for is that we go through this agreement first, get on the same page there, then we can, then we're done with this part of it, if it pleases Your Honor, and then we can move on to the project
This
specifications.
one is.
So this agreement here is different than the one we were just handed, so.
Yes,
Can you print us a copy of this one?
I got another copy.
Okay.
Tom, did you have a question? Schneider?
Do we want to go through?
Yeah,
Just-
let's do that, yeah.
Is that how we want to proceed?
up to
Chairman,
you.
you want to go through the,
it's up to you guys. Yeah.
you want to do it that way and try to get to, all right.
I do not think so. I'm gonna make copies of, I'll make copies of both of these. I don't have an extra, so.
While everybody's getting ready, I just in general terms, there are, I would consider, two components in each of the agreements. One of which is the protections for the city, in terms of which we indicated last time, and I think, Mel, you stated several times that we needed to do that, and to that extent, within the contract, it talks about the city, their role retaining ownership in those properties for a number of years, and having some say in the things that go on and around the property. So that's one element. The other element is the financial piece. What's the commitment on the business development, and what's the commitment on the city? So there's a few typos, obviously, but at the getting down to the brass tacks here, it's can the business development group agree with the protection, the terms that the city has put forth, which is retaining some control of the property, and can you agree to the financial terms, which are roughly 50% of the build-out? That's roughly everything in a nutshell.
Okay. And just to back up, just so I have a complete understanding, at the last meeting, I know we presented terms, and at one point, we were proceeding with a vote. It was determined by legal counsel not to proceed with that vote, and you wanted legal protections from the standpoint of personal protection, personal guarantees, and I think the term clawback if we do not achieve our goal. And so this is a bit of a change. So terms have changed. So I don't know where we,
Well,
I guess
let's just go through the agreement. I drafted these agreements and I sent them out on Friday. Today's Wednesday. I asked for us to meet yesterday. The mayor did too. So,
what I got Friday is different than what I got today.
Okay.
And then I just got a new one just a
Right.
minute ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you guys,
We
you guys
never-
have to
so-
go through it. You have to have time to go
we
through
will
it.
go,
I
I'll
understand
read
it.
this to you line by line. But
Well, before we begin, just so I understand, is it the commission's intention to change Reso Engineering's original proposal to put an amount forward? It's my understanding they were gonna put an initial amount forward of in-kind services and then ask for a repayment term, and a construction fund. Is that no longer the commission's goal? It sounds like the terms have been changed, that Reso will put up a larger amount at the beginning of the project.
Well, Anthony, I think with what they have to do, they don't have to come up with a cash amount to give to us. I think what we're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is paying for 50% of the project.
Okay. And I think that was all in our original term, but in this, it's referring to a 165,000, which doesn't, I'm not sure how that matches the 50%, so that's where I'm a little confused, so.
Yeah.
I used the build-out number that you provided, the 330,000. The build-out number of 330,000.
440, the project cost was 440.
That included fixtures and equipment that we agreed we would not supply.
It included restaurant equipment, and I never agreed we wouldn't be part of the project. At the last meeting, I said it was part of the project. It was included. Any restaurant that you bring in, that has to happen. You have to make it ready. You'd have to do it if you're gonna build it out yourself for a restaurant, you'd have to spend that money.
Okay, you're
So we
talking
were
about,
asking to
talking about tables and chairs, or you're
No.
talking about stoves and
restaurant
refrigerators?
equipment, commercial kitchen equipment
Okay.
is all we were talking about.
right.
And I did clarify that at the last meeting. So we're talking, the total project cost is 440. So I guess that's where we're off on the amounts.
That 440, again, I will reiterate, does include tables and chairs.
No, it does not.
I have a total here of about 300,000 subtotal white box, which includes hood, sprinkler system, and all those things aforementioned. And then the following line item says 110,000 for kitchen, restaurant, equipment, and furniture. That is separate from the build out of the white box.
Okay. That 110,000, I have the quote. It is kitchen equipment. So again,
So-
as if there is an error here, that's my error if it says furniture.
Because
it's
up
not on
above
there.
it says hood, HVAC, sprinkler system.
Yeah. Those
Those are all-
hood is a separate issue. That's like a $35,000. That's totally different than the commercial kitchen. And like I said, I have the receipt, and you guys are gonna be paying the party, so you won't be paying for furniture. I'm telling you that right now, it's not in there. So, if that
So
was
you're
my
saying,
error on that.
you're saying the build out is 440? in your opinion?
440 for restaurant ready.
And your
That's
estimate?
correct.
Okay.
Not including furnishers. Well, I've already talked to the restaurant operator about that, and he already has a plan for what he's gonna do for furniture and all that. So that is separate. I mean, you have my word on it. So I'd be looking at splitting the 220. That would be the number that I would be happy with at this point, so. As far as personal guarantees and that, we have no issue with that. I know the city has to be protected. You know, nobody goes into anything with the intention to default, okay? But you still have to have those protections in place. I get it, and we're willing to do that, so.
So fundamentally, Mike, you would agree to the 5-year term where we retain ownership to protect the city's investment in our property?
Well, I thought that's what we had in the land contract arrangement, because you do keep control of that property until it's transferred at the very end in the final payment.
So you agree fundamentally with that principle?
Yes.
Okay, so then
Yes.
where we're lacking is on the sharing of the expenses for the build-out.
Yeah,
That's where the disagreement is.
That's what I understand.
Specifically. And your suggestion is you're willing to invest $110,000? Is that what I heard?
I thought are we talking about just the?
Or 220,000?
The project cost, the split?
Yeah.
Correct.
And what was the number you were willing to?
Their initial proposal said shall contribute $30,000 to the construction fund immediately for expenses, $50,000 in-kind contribution for project manager, designer, and engineering fees of $50,000, and then a repayment of $139,000 over the 5-year term of the land sale contract.
That was our original proposal.
So what's that total?
220.
220, which was half of their build-out that they had provided earlier, I guess, earlier in this process.
So you're happy with 220,
I'm happy with 220, yes.
including the 50 and the 30?
Yes,
Okay, that's part of the 220.
yes,
In the 5 years?
yes. Now, we just need to, you know, however you want to structure that, whether it's, if it's a land contract. And let me explain one other thing too. We had provisions in here to pay taxes, whether you maintain ownership or not, it was our intention to pay taxes, okay? But that money should go back. So that's where we were proceeding down the land contract avenue, is it made more sense that way than whether you just keep the building and then turn it over at a period of time. But, you know, however, whatever makes sense, we can agree to those terms.
Well, let me ask you a question. Will you have it completed by December 19th of this
We
year?
will have a restaurant in there and operating. Are you comfortable with that date? I mean, we're targeting September.
Don't cut yourself too close.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things I saw that was struck out in here is, you know, some of the
Easement was, I think, removed.
oh yeah, that was another issue. Our easement was
That
removed.
date's still in there.
Hmm?
The date is still in there, December
Yeah.
19th.
Can I go back to just to the fundamental? We've got agreement on what I prefer in the terms of protecting our investment in our property. And I think there's enough said about that.
Okay.
So now we're closing in on a numeric value.
I just clarified, do you,
Sure.
is the board in agreement that a land sale contract would be acceptable to the board? I think the terms could be that if there's a violation of the agreement, that would
Yeah,
violate the
right,
land sale contract, and then that way that at least that there's a recordable interest
Right.
that Reza would
So
maintain.
right now, we're gonna vote on the 220.
Okay.
But that date is what I wanna make clear.
Okay.
What I don't want is you all to be hamstrung by a date that somebody picked out of the air.
Yeah, I can't say that we've never talked about, we've always talked about target dates, you know, and when you're talking about target dates, and there's dates in my mind that I want to have things ready, and those are always different than dates that, when, if you aren't ready by this date, your default, okay, that's a big difference. And,
That's in here.
yes,
If you're not ready by December 19th, you're in breach.
right.
I want to make sure that that isn't too tight.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm gonna answer this from the standpoint of, it is not our intention to drag this process out.
I understand.
Any more than it is right now, but
Yeah.
I would like to see that date moved further into the future, because I don't want any chance, especially with, all the, so a lot of the restrictions were struck as to what is our fault and and what isn't. You know, a riot is now, you know, somebody goes there and starts throwing bricks through the building. The day before we're December 19th, I'm in default. So, I would look at,
The most logical thing in my mind is 12 months from whenever we sign agreement.
12 months?
When we sign agreement, yes. That's comfortable. We want to go before that, but that's
I understand, but you want a 12-month time frame.
Yes, that's
Okay.
unfair
and
or reasonable.
without a doubt, I mean, again, if we can get going tonight, you know, get moving forward to the next stage, our target is still September, to try to get something going this fall in that space.
Okay,
But that's aggressive.
That's-
and-
okay, that's not gonna be in the contract.
No, please don't put that in there.
May I ask a question? And if I missed this, I apologize. But in the one that's drafted here, I mean, is this still only going to be the 30,000 up front? Or according to this, it's, so instead of 165, it would be 220 upon the CO and showing that he expended his 220. Like he wouldn't get it till the very end.
Right.
Is that what we're going with? He wouldn't get it to the very end now, correct?
I think.
So there would be no,
Well,
Well,
that's
no,
what
no.
this contract reads.
Okay. With our part of the 220, as I understand it, as you submit a bill from a contractor or a supplier, we would pay that contractor or supplier out of our 220, correct?
correct. Well, yes.
There was financing
But
in the
there was-
initial proposal as well.
Yeah.
Exactly, so there's financing too, so we submit a down payment, then there's the land contract financing,
Okay.
then there's your contribution, all
Right.
that into
And then
that.
over the 5-year period, you will pay the difference between the 80 and the 220 back. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
So how do you propose, so the 440 is based on what, your engineering estimates?
yes.
Do we have stamped plans?
No, but we have schematics, and we did get bids off of those.
Okay.
And I did talk to Mike, or we did talk about this, that, you know, this is engineering estimates. Obviously, you know, if we to agree to go forward, when we reached and got stamp drawings and more specifics, we would have, and that's why I always preferred to say not to exceed, because our belief is that once we get a little closer, these engineering estimates were a little
Once you get a little
on
closer,
high
the number
side.
will get harder.
Then we'll know exactly what, we won't know exactly what the number is until it's over.
Well, there was
But it's a
also,
not to exceed on our part.
correct, and there's also contingency in that number.
Right.
So it was our initial thought, going through this, we have to have a number to start with.
Yeah.
So pretty much that is our not to exceed. 440 is not to exceed. The project conceivably can come under that, and it's less money for everybody.
Okay.
So, that's where we're at.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? You guys are talking about your C of O. But earlier you said that you were gonna have some outside, but you were gonna concentrate on the inside of the building. And then there would be work done later upstairs and what have you.
Correct.
So the C of O wouldn't be issued at 100% completion?
No, the CO will be 100% for the main floor.
Okay,
okay?
all right. That's what we would be looking at as
Right.
a complete.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. I'm looking for a motion. We'll kind of clear these up one at a time, so we don't get all confused. I'm looking for a motion to approve the 220 on the city's part, not to exceed. The date change to 1 year after signing. I think that's all we've agreed on so far.
Would you guys be comfortable to have it completed by March 31st? To have it ready?
They're shooting for September.
Right, I understand, but I would like to see it done.
Well, we would like to see it done in September, but I
Sure.
don't want to hold them to a date. When you're doing construction, everything moves. Everything's fluid.
My thought is to have it completed by the time the park opens next year,
We'd love to. I
at
mean,
the
that's
very latest.
a very
Sure.
realistic goal. But right now, there's no signing date yet. That bothers me, but I have every intention of seeing it by
Can we,
that March 31st or sooner.
I think, yeah, I agree. It would almost,
If
like,
it's
if
not
I agree,
signed until later this summer, then we've lost 2 years.
so,
Well, every time it keeps delaying. We want to be open by
We want it
this
signed
year,
tonight.
June 1st.
We want it agreed on tonight. We want the rough outline agreed on tonight.
I mean, are you
Okay.
comfortable that if we have an agreement tonight, March 31st, we're fine with that? I would agree to that.
3 months later.
Yeah,
If-
we have an
Okay.
agreement
I
tonight.
would agree to
Yeah.
that. If we can get an agreement tonight, then and we can start moving forward.
March 31.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
All right, change my motion to March 31.
Okay.
Or change my request to March 31.
That's what you're asking for now.
I got your
Are
request.
you guys
March
satisfied
31st.
with that?
Yes, sir.
You
Okay.
feel secure?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
So you're just moving for the half of the
can we-
440? What about their half?
Is their half. 220 is their half.
So the agreement is that we'll both put in 220?
220.
That's my understanding.
They're saying they want us
We're
to
not gonna
loan
give you
them
We're not gonna give anybody any money until we get the C of O done, right?
That's
what
not
I
what
was
they're asking for.
That's what I was asking.
They're
about,
asking, correct me if I'm wrong, that we contribute $220,000, that they contribute $30,000, that
Upfront.
we
And 50,000 in kind.
50,000. What's
Kind.
that?
In kind.
What's in kind for engineering?
Engineering,
So
design.
we pay them $50,000
No.
to engineer their own project.
No.
That's their
No.
expense.
But it's like kind, so
They're
we're
con-
matching it.
No, we're not putting in the 50.
They're putting it into services.
They're paying
Basically.
for
I
their
understand.
engineers.
I understand
Yeah,
that.
so,
But they own an engineering company,
Right.
right?
well, they still have to pay their
No,
employees.
that's not what.
And then but they want us to loan them
And then
the
there's,
balance.
That's just a loan.
165.
We're really putting in 385.
So we're putting in 220, we're loaning them 165. They're putting in 220. They're gonna pay us back the 165.
Right, I just wanted,
Yeah.
Is that the way you understand it?
yes, the way Mel
Yeah.
described it, yes.
Okay.
So no, and the answer to your question is no. That's not what is happening.
That'll be this,
It's
my
not
second
after
motion.
And I,
CO.
if I just
Pay it as they go and we
may throw a thought in here
put it down.
as we continue the discussion that, for other properties, keep in mind that this is not precedent setting. This is a property that
This,
has been under,
yeah, this deal is for
yeah,
Zoe Engineering, or whatever they call themselves.
so, again, the park will be open and the demand for the properties should go up and the contribution on behalf of the public should go down. That's always the goal. So I'm just letting everybody know that
Liz, for
this is a
group
very
right
specific deal at a very specific time.
The one-on-one.
and may not be replicated in any other fashion in the
I'm
future.
still-
May or may not.
I still
So
need that
moved.
motion. Okay,
Yeah,
I
I
need a
didn't move
second.
my chair.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we got that part done.
Thank you.
Do you have that, Kelly?
I have a motion to approve up to 220 on the city side, not to exceed after, and then March 31st is the date.
Okay,
Well,
That's
how
it.
do-
That's all.
now
I
we're
have.
gonna talk about how you pay it back.
Well, I have a couple questions. One, how is this paid? So we start the project, they start the project, you know, we get the first bill from a subcontractor, who pays that? We start paying right off the bat?
Yeah.
Where does their 30,000 in cash come into
Well, you
play?
can pay it out of the 30,000. They're gonna pay that right away.
Well, we need to know that for the,
Well, that's gonna be in the next motion.
and
That's
then
the
where
main
does
part.
the 50,000 come from?
Well, what we had originally proposed was that the commission would establish a fund of $440,000, of which $30,000 of that would be provided by Rezo immediately. That they would submit invoices that would be, that the commission would use to pay.
80,000 less than 440.
Well, our original proposal, that's what our original proposal was.
But that's what I'm saying, if we put
Yeah.
in 440, we're paying for $50,000 for the like-kind services.
They were receiving in the proposal, they were receiving a credit for that work. They were not being paid for that work. So it was a contribution of essentially $270,000 from this board is my understanding of how that was working in the
Well,
original proposal.
Okay, my understanding is that the $80,000, the 50,000 in kind, and the 30,000 cash, okay? And then our contribution is 220, and their contribution is that 80, we'll call it, plus 160. I guess that's 240. Yeah, okay. But we will not accept any invoices from Rizzo Engineering for design or management or
Correct.
anything like that.
Correct.
Okay.
With furniture.
Or furniture, yeah,
Correct.
or furniture. Okay. So, that should be the second motion, I guess.
Oh, please. Can we restate the motion?
Sure.
That would be
Okay.
great.
We would establish a fund
Okay,
of 385,000.
385,
All right, think, 380.
380?
Or wait a minute, is my math wrong?
Make a suggestion.
Sure.
This is getting crazy.
Yeah.
Why even do the in-kind? Why don't you just add it into the project, split it out, and you'll get a bill from them? I
Right.
mean,
If we can-
why mess around with the whole in-kind thing and worry about, oh, did they give us $50,000 worth of work, or did they not give us $50,000?
I'm not worried about that.
They can bill us and they
mean-
can write it off then, basically.
Yeah.
We're putting way too many
Detail.
variables into
Yeah.
this project.
Can't we do that?
Let's
now?
just make it simple.
Sure, make a motion.
Good. I'll make a motion. We go ahead and leave it in there. We go with the 220?
Can you pull your mic down, please?
Go with the 220.
Okay,
And we'll just leave all that in there. And then with their services, they'll just submit a bill, and we won't pay that bill. We'll just put that in with the regular bills, because with what we've, services rendered
For
from
their
from
two-
that, from
for
that,
their
that deal.
220.
Yeah,
Okay.
the deal we're making here tonight. Is that all right with you guys?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's the motion.
Get him in the door.
I need a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Who made the second?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we got that out of the way. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Anything else?
The original proposal included an easement for the patio. An easement, I guess would be, on the park, on the new park. And that was removed from the current
The
proposal.
abandoned alleyway.
Or, yeah, exactly. So I guess we need to discuss how that would work, because they anticipated a covered patio there for seating.
So in every drawing that we submitted, there was outside seating, and it's very crucial. It's there, that's gonna be the revenue months, it's gonna be the summer, especially with the park, with the music. I mean, it is supposed to be a function of the park, this building, in my opinion. So we did have an easement in there and it was struck, so we need to definitely have some, they're assuring us that we will have this space, that it will be tied to the deed of, the easement will be tied to the deed of 124 Vine and, Vine Short. Don't record that. And, so we need that for our protection and for my restaurant operator, obviously, because that's about, 90 seats out there.
Do you remember, Brian, the width and length of that easement proposal?
No, but we'd have to do the research and document it properly, which I believe we're all in favor of.
Yes.
I don't think there's any doubt there. I mean, we would have, I mean, obviously I think everybody agrees we want to do that. I'm not sure I understand every implication of transferring that property with the deed, or if we would do a 100-year lease for $1. I don't know what the best legal mechanism is for that, but I certainly can't see any prohibition of using that area.
Well, that's what you need to think about. I mean,
Yeah.
how much do you want to encroach on your new park? And once the 5-year period is ended, the goal of this deal is to transfer that property. You then transfer them property permanently that is either part of the park or touches the park.
Yeah.
So
Do y'all remember the width and length?
Yeah, it's on the drawings.
Yeah, I believe it was 12 feet, and that was inside rail to wall.
And we'll have to verify that meets, I mean, yeah, and like I said, I think we all agree. I'm just not sure if it can be on the deed, Anthony, you know what I'm saying, or should it be one of those long-term weird things that, just because it is
Yeah,
there.
what I proposed was that, what I proposed actually as a protection for the commission was that you only grant a temporary easement in the beginning 5 years in case, something happened, because it's only a land sale contract. And then after that, I suggested that it become permanent, and obviously you want it to become permanent for
To be included
124.
with the deed?
Yeah, and you could probably even put restrictions on it if you wanted to make sure that it's always used for that purpose.
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
Yeah,
just some little
but I'm sure Dell and I
assurance.
could work out some sort of protection that, if it wasn't used for that purpose, that it came back to the city.
I don't think there's any disagreement
Yeah.
with that.
So are you going to seal off that alley, or is that already sealed off?
It's already sealed.
I think
off.
did the city vacate that alley? I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just a nice place for an outdoor dining.
And just so there's another, there's an understanding of why we have to enclose this, it's also part of the liquor laws. So to be able to serve in there, we have to have railing
Yes.
up, so
No, I understand.
otherwise you could just throw seats out in the, and.
I understand. Because to my understanding, there will be no alcohol in the park. So we have to separate that. You'll have to go through the liquor board with that situation.
So do we need any type of, so we just work that out, we
I
don't need
have
any
it
type
Yeah.
noted. I just want to
motion.
include it. I mean, if
Okay.
we make a motion for every
Okay.
Is that it?
item,
Um,
I don't know if that's necessary.
they have pre-approval for
There
all
are
of
a
it.
hundred, yeah, easily.
Are you fine with that provision?
Yeah, I think this is relatively simple. Again, because you throw that word default out there, and the last thing I want to do is default. But if for something were to happen to our operator and he doesn't make it 5 years for whatever reason, and I need to replace them, you have a pre-approval clause in there, which I don't have any objection to that. But it would be nice to have some guidelines so that I know, what you can reject and, what you're rejecting and what you're accepting, so that when I bring somebody to you, there is criteria for a rejection, and it's not just, for whatever reason. I want protection on my side for that as well.
In general terms, like kind, family restaurant,
Okay, I mean, that's all.
no
very
smoking.
simple. Family restaurant,
Yeah.
standard operating hours,
Right.
10, maybe 11 on the weekends for closing.
Yeah, your customers will dictate the hours,
Right.
pretty much.
And to be clear, I mean, if it changed from steaks and hamburgers to Cajun or barbecue, I don't think that's a deal breaker in my mind, as long as it's, a interactive family style.
Okay, and that's all I just wanted to make clear here.
Yeah.
that, So I think we're 100% in agreement on that.
Okay.
Well, and so the exhibit to this document is going to be the project specification. So you as a commission get to pick exactly what it looks like. You get to pick exactly the business that goes in there. You get to pick exactly the hours, whether it's smoking or non-smoking, and you have to do it now. We had a business, that we contributed to in these last 3 years that said they would stay open for certain hours. That wasn't part of the agreement, and then they didn't stay open for certain hours. So this is the only time to have your thoughts weigh in on what goes in there. And when it's open, we have people from the row house community here. The row house community came to the last meeting. They're interested in what goes on around their houses where they live. So, and also historical landmarks, facade, general groups, like the park committee. Everyone has an opportunity to weigh in, but only when we approve what would be Exhibit A, which are the project specifications.
So what we proposed originally, and it was what we brought to you last week or last meeting. I know we had in there, and I'm just going from my memory, it's in this pile of paper somewhere, but it was 6 days a week, open, minimum of 6 days a week. He's planning on 7, but we had a minimum of 6. Family restaurant, non-smoking, and his hours, I don't think that was in there, but his hours are going to be, I think, close at 10 and maybe 11 or 12 on the weekends if he has some live music or something like that. But he's not a late night establishment, and let me see if I hit everything that I just mentioned. So,
Do you have a lease with the restaurant?
we have a signed agreement. I can't go any further till I have from this board
What's
approval.
generally the agreement? How, is it for 5 years? Is it for 10 years?
5 years.
Okay.
5 years automatically renewing.
And I don't know if this is too picky or not, but obviously, we're going to have music in the park, and we probably would not want competing. I don't want to be crazy, but there may be some. I don't think we want big bands in that place. If it was,
Would a city
acoustic
ordinance
kind of-
control that?
Pardon me?
A city
Well,
ordinance
it
would not
gets-
control that.
No.
I'm just saying, once we're thinking about this, there may be. I don't think we want big bands out on the patio.
Okay.
I don't think that's what we have in mind.
I know in his restaurant that he operated, he did have 2 nights a week of live music. He did those indoors. So if that's a restriction, then that's a restriction.
And I'm
Now,
just saying this is the time. To Dell's point, I mean,
No.
and I know we're being overly careful, but really this is a good thing.
I feel
This
like
is an opportunity.
if we, whatever the sound ordinances are, if we meet that, because he does have, he does have a few acoustic group, like single guy that plays a guitar and sits out on the patio and plays a guitar. I'm sure that's not a nuisance to anybody, but, so I'd hate to say, no live music on the patio if it's you know, something along those lines, so.
Not competition, you're staying with it.
No, I just, to
I'd
Dell's
just be
point, I mean,
courteous
this is
to
a
the
time to
events that
flesh.
go
I
on
don't
at
think
the park,
we're gonna
pretty much.
disagree as much
Yeah.
as we just need to be
Right.
understanding.
Del, to some degree, our agreement is with Rezo. This agreement would be between Rezo and the restaurant owner, right? So
We would
how
still have
far does our
control.
reach go?
Our reach goes all the way
As
to
far
the
as you want it,
bottom.
it's our property.
Okay,
So you can say they close at 9 PM every night. You can say no live music. You can say,
Tight hands that tight.
wait, you can do whatever you want.
the current well, when he was running his restaurant in Hebron, his closing hours were 11, I believe, and
10, I think 10 most weeknights, and then
11 on the
Friday and
weekends.
Saturday night 11.
Okay.
Maybe Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, because I think he would bring music in on Thursday night, so he would stay open an hour later. But, you know, I you know, kind of like the flexibility of, I mean, I think the flexibility to stay open to midnight, I don't think that's too late. You're not bringing in that, in my opinion, not bringing in the wrong type of crowd. But if you guys want to put a tighter restriction on it, then, you know, by all means, that's what we're standing here for.
Okay,
I think midnight's fair. For what it's worth.
I'm thinking, this is just my thoughts. If you put a restriction on the live music, ends at 11 PM on weekends, okay? If he wants to stay open till midnight inside, I don't have a problem. I don't think the people in the row houses would. It would be inside only though.
Yeah.
Patio would close at 11.
Well, out of a common courtesy, you wouldn't have music the same night we had music in the street, would you?
No, that would be a waste of resources to pay for live music when you have live music going on right there. I mean,
Does anyone want to make a motion on that, on those restrictions?
So moved.
Well, what are we doing?
I don't.
We need plans.
Well,
I
we need
don't know why
drawings,
we're
we need-
making
here's
motions
what we're
on-
gonna do, Dale.
Well, we can't just vote on something that
I-
is not in front of us. Well, I would say
You don't
not
want
to.
this deal, does it? We just did.
No, that's not
we're gonna
it.
put
How
in the
we're
agreement.
doing the motions is,
The
I
restrictions
don't know why we
that
just don't vote on
the
a
patio
final
closes at
contract or
11.
this isn't
No live music outside.
a process.
Patio closes at 11. If he wants to stay open inside until midnight on the weekends only, that's fine. In my opinion, I think that's the motion, correct?
I personally hesitate to tell the guy how to run his business.
It's our building. That's the
If he
only.
causes issues, then we deal with issues, but
I do kind of agree.
That's my
I agree
personal
with you on
opinion.
that.
Well,
if he wants to stay open until 2 o'clock in the morning, but he's not causing any problems, then
Yeah, I agree
Then-
with you on that.
I don't see the problem.
well, there's a house adjacent, there are a number of houses adjacent to that. I think that if you're having music outside until midnight or 2 AM,
yeah, noise ordinance.
If
Yeah,
there's
right.
if he's causing problems, then we
Okay.
deal with the problems, but if a guy's out on the patio playing a guitar to 6 people, I may come join him.
I mean, if we can keep that just simple,
I'm in
abide by
favor
the
of
noise
keep it
ordinance, and that's fine. And if you, here's the thing, you know, the closing the patio at a certain time, and you know how people are. Okay, they're gonna walk up, they're gonna go inside, they're gonna have a drink, and it's gonna be a beautiful night. The place is open, they're gonna wanna walk out there and sit on the patio, even if there's nothing going on, just to look at the park or do whatever. So I would argue that, the patio probably should be open the same hours as the restaurant, just to give people the freedom to choose where they want to sit. And again, that's 90 seats out there, and if it's a really nice night, you might get people sitting out there a little later. And
Could we go with something midnight? Just cut the music off outside at 11 o'clock? Something like that?
It's up to you guys.
I think we're somewhat parallel with the city ordinance on noise.
Yep.
So we're creating an additional rule that already probably exists.
I agree with Kevin. And you know how we feel.
Back to the motion. Did somebody actually make a second on whatever the motion was? So it died for lack of second?
No, I see. So
You second? No, Owen said he seconded it, so then I would need a
we need to do that.
roll call, or you could rescind your motion.
Okay, to rescind the motion,
I'll make a motion, we rescind that motion.
I will second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Yeah, just verify that it's gonna be a land contract, correct?
Make a motion of what you just brought up.
Anything else?
What is our intent here? Is there,
Our intent is to get this contract done this evening, the proposed contract, and vote on the outcome, get this darn thing. That's
okay,
our intent.
so we navigated into somewhat instructing
Our control.
the restaurant owner how to run his business. Is there, we want him to be open, but
Correct.
we don't want him to go out of business because we're telling him to stay open when nobody's in his restaurant.
He can stay open if he wants to. If he wants to close at 8 o'clock, that's up to him.
Could we just put a limit that in our group, midnight period, he can run whatever, however he wants to run anything else?
Well, he's already made the statement, 10 o'clock during the week, and on the weekends,
Well,
maybe 11.
that's up to him. We set,
Yeah.
if we set to midnight, he can do whatever he wants to do with it.
Okay, all right, I agree.
Something like that?
Okay.
I don't know.
Anything else?
Yeah,
I don't know that we need the motion.
okay.
Personally, I think
Need to.
we let him stay open as long as he's not causing problems.
Okay.
He abides by the law.
Do the same thing that.
Yeah.
We'll just let it go the way it is.
Anything else?
Let me see here. Did we decide the land sale contract issue, or was that resolved?
The alley?
Land sale contracted, the 5-year period and the repayment period. We had proposed land sale contract, and I don't think, we got a motion and agreement on the funds and who's applying what funds, and
Okay.
on that payback of the funds.
Over a 5-year period.
Yeah, over the 5-year, with a land sale contract that we record,
Right.
okay?
We do not have,
Is the board in agreement with that?
Okay.
I don't know if they are.
I'll
The
accept
agreement they were given was not that, so.
Pardon me?
The agreement that you guys were given was not a
I'll make a
land
motion
sale.
on the land sale contract.
Okay. Is there a second?
Could you repeat that, please?
It would be a land sale contract for 5 years, and it would include the repayment set out in the initial proposal at the last meeting.
What's 100?
The term would be for 5 years, and it would be $139,630
I don't,
to repay.
no,
No.
I think we need to jack that up.
Need
It's
to
gonna
move
be
that number up a little
180,000.
bit.
Yeah, I don't think that matches up with the other
Instead of
motion.
130, it should be 180.
Was that because of the,
Or 100.
because of the engineering services and all that?
Okay.
Because we took the engineering off.
So does that come as a lump sum?
It was to be repaid monthly over 5 years at 0% interest.
Starting in year 5?
No,
Actually, it was to
Starting
be
immediately?
to start immediately. Yeah.
Okay.
Starting
Immediately upon completion of the project, the repayment starts.
Upon completion.
that what the board understands?
Got that?
Bill?
Well, I mean, so typically with a land sale contract, you pay on it for 4.5 years, you default, and then that's it. You don't have any equity in the property. Property reverts back to the owner. We keep the improvements. Is that what you're proposing?
I mean, I think that if they put equity in the property, we would like to get that equity back, but I also think that the way that it's written now, it's kind of like a promise to give it to them in the future. They don't have a current interest, and I fear that they're putting a lot of money into the property with a promise that they'll get it in the future, and I think a land sale contract protects both parties better now than it would just a promise in the future.
But it's not really a land sale contract because the amount that you would pay monthly is repaying the loan that we're giving you, right?
Well, really, we're repaying a loan for the construction, but the land sale contract is basically that they're getting the property from this commission on a land sale contract.
So how would you propose, I mean, if there's a default in year 3, how would you propose we measure the equity? Just you would want all the payments you made back in cash?
No, I don't think that would be probably fair to this commission. But any investment that they had made themselves outside of that construction fund, if they've put, for instance, furniture and things like that into the building, I would think that they would want to get the back outside of the initial investment in the construction fund.
But the land contract is in lieu of not putting up a big down payment. That's where we're getting our equity back, our money back over the 5-year repayment plan. So even if we put the restaurant equipment in, they wouldn't have any investment in that if they default in 3 years.
Only the furniture.
So, but furniture is going to be in year 5, correct, Mike? I mean, you're not going to put furniture in there in year 3. I mean, I'm sorry, but as soon as you put the furniture is not stuff that's attached to the wall.
Right, I agree.
I'm talking about the hood and stuff like that. Stuff that you guys are obviously paying some of that back, but I mean, they shouldn't be entitled to anything back if they default in year 3.
Well,
Restaurateur, if you default on your restaurant, you don't get your investment back. Because I'm a restaurateur, you don't get it back. You lose everything. That's called the risk.
well, those costs that we're talking about, we're in agreement that they're not getting any of those costs back in default. And I agree that would be in the land sale contract. I'm saying any of their personal property that's gonna go in there, that we would ask, obviously, that they be able to remove those things, but, yeah. I think if someone is saying that they're I think what this agreement is currently saying is that they're putting money into the building that they don't own, that they're going to provide services, that they're going to manage it, that they're going to bring a tenant, but that they don't own it, that this commission currently owns it. And so the question is, how do they sign a contract with an operator when they don't own the business, when they don't own the building, or do anything of that nature when they don't own the building? And this commission is essentially saying, we promise in the future to transfer property, which isn't always enforceable. And so what we're saying is that we would like to do a land sale contract that just reiterates these terms and says, we would like to record it. If we default, we agree, you can evict us, and,
So can we give you the authority to sign a lease as a commission?
I would think so. I mean, it depends on how we structure the
How we structure
5-year term. But the other thing to think of, I mean, we don't want this property to be encumbered in any way. We don't want
No.
anyone to be able to mortgage the property or take a loan against the property.
Well, you put that in the lease. Put that in there.
Isn't that in here somewhere?
I thought that was already.
This is,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's in our version.
Right. We did not have a problem with agreeing to that.
Well, there's just, I do want to say, I mean, there's a lot to an agreement like this, obviously, as everyone's seeing. And I know that in the past, we've done this kind of discussion in executive session, we've done it in offices, and we're striving to do all of this in public. And that's because this is a public deal, right? I mean, we're sitting
Right.
up here representing the public. But it is also a little awkward, I would say, as an attorney to be negotiating these terms. So, just generally, I don't want to leave anything out, and I don't feel super comfortable just going back and forth on what are really important terms. There are a lot of other terms of this agreement, and there's obviously an exhibit that includes a design that isn't even finalized yet. So, I mean, if we just say, hey, we vote to agree to the deal tonight, and then the final design isn't something you like, can you then come back and make changes? I don't think so. Or the restaurant, I mean, I would say, and you guys can do whatever you want, that you would want to know exactly what the final building's going to look like, exactly what the restaurant's going to be, whatever it is. I mean, if you want to be open until 2, that's fine, but you want that in writing attached to this agreement, and then you could vote on it, and then it would be enforceable rather than having things left hanging after we.
Can't you vote on it and work those out?
Wait just a minute.
No, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Wait just a minute. Here's what okay, Paul, but let me say this. I'm not going to invest in a design and submittal to the state until I know that I have control of that building.
You're talking 15, 20 grand, guys.
Exactly.
You just can't expect them to come up with an exact design of state release without a commitment, without some sign. Just, ain't nobody gonna do that.
Well, and that's fair too.
Let me ask you this, would you feel more comfortable if after they signed this agreement, you gave them, cause you're gonna have to come up with a state release and a set of plans in 45 or 60 days? At that point, you work with them in that period of time, because at that point, they know they ain't gonna mind spending that 15 or 20 grand. And you can work with them, and I agree, there's a lot of places you go and they wanna participate in what that building's gonna look like, you guys know that. But somehow or another, you gotta get by having everything before you sign anything, because it's just too much money for anybody.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Give them a period of time after they sign it.
Well, typically, how long does it take for a state release? Let's go this. How long does it take to a final state release?
For a project this size, you're holding me to these numbers, right? So
I'm just, give me a
probably,
ballpark.
I would want a total of 90 days plus 30 days for the state.
And you would feel comfortable allowing us to participate in that process and have input into what goes up to the state for final approval?
Absolutely, I have no problems with that at all. I think everybody's in agreement with the schematics we've provided. I mean, hopefully we're on the right path, right?
The state release is not colors or textures, it's basic construction and infrastructure. That's all it is.
Yeah, and I want the board and beyond the board, everyone else to be able to weigh in on colors and textures, and because it's part of the park.
That's afterwards.
Yeah.
Partner in that doesn't have a thing to do with the state. The
Yeah.
state doesn't care if you paint it blue and purple.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so if we could agree tonight to allow at least this commission and whoever else to weigh in on that process all the way through, and then that is what is attached as Exhibit A to the agreement, then that gives you that input and achieves what Paul said, which is the commitment that allows them to move to the next step.
We're in agreement.
Okay. So, what you need for a state permit is some sort of agreement from us saying that you will own the building after 5 years. Okay? The textures and colors and all the other stuff, we have to agree on together as a group, okay? So if you want to paint it pink and blue, we can say no. It has to be green and red. Okay?
I like black and gold, but that's just my preference.
No Steelers colors there.
That's a deal breaker.
No Steelers colors.
Purdue colors.
I kind of like red and gray, but, you know.
Yes, sir. Yeah, well, if I
We're making Dell nervous.
make it through this meeting without having a nervous breakdown.
You will.
Our
Thank you,
money's
Mel.
worth out of it
Young,
tonight.
you're young. Now, I'm the one having the nervous breakdown. You're younger than I am.
So it sounds like what we have agreed to and what we can agree to, I'm gonna kill Anthony after this meeting, by the way, is, hung me out to dry, I thought we were friends, is that there's $440,000, just correct me at any point, $440,000 total project cost. That is by engineered estimates based on bids. So these are reliable numbers based on your engineered estimates and bids. Is that correct?
Yes, bids off a schematic, okay?
And that's
so-
a not to exceed, so it could be less than that, plus there's a contingency, so it could be less than that. So what we've agreed to as a commission is to contribute $220,000 in a grant, and then the remaining $220,000, there would be $30,000 cash up front, $50,000 in like kind, which is a valuation of the engineering that you're doing, that you would normally have to pay for.
Engineering, design, and project management.
Engineering, design, and project management,
Yeah.
and then the remaining amount would be repaid monthly over the course of the 5 years. That's going to be recorded in the form of a land sale contract. At the culmination of 5 years, absent any breach, then that property would be transferred. The property that is in the former alley, so not encroaching into the park, but the former alley, that would align the property line, would be surveyed and become part of that property, so subject to land sale and then eventual transfer. The design, the ultimate design, including everything, so paint colors, inside, outside, would be subject to final approval by the commission, and we could work that out just by having steering committee meetings, and we could put a steering committee together if that's okay. And that would also include the restaurant. I know you have most of the details with the restaurant ironed out, but we would like at least to weigh in on that. I know what Kevin's saying, and I agree with it, but I also know what these guys at the row houses are saying, and I want to strike a balance. I know Tony talked, I just heard Tony, overheard him say, historical preservation, landmarks, there's a lot of groups that need to be happy and satisfied. So we just want to make sure that they all are. So if we can agree that Exhibit A would be a work in progress, subject to final approval by the board, as the steering committee will meet and report back to the board, then it seems like that covers everything.
I think so.
Hey, Mel,
Yes.
could I see if we could put maybe the fire chief on that steering committee, means it's a firehouse, and maybe get some of his input with these guys here, because fire related, it would be a good idea, because
I
I'm sure
think-
there's some things that we would use in there.
Yeah, but, okay, we have to be careful with that, because the restaurateur is gonna have, maybe he doesn't want a firehouse theme.
Right, if he does.
Maybe he
If-
wants an alligator theme or a
Right.
crocodile theme. or
Right, but
something.
if he does, we can ask Mr. Tremaine, see if he
Sure,
would like to
absolutely.
assist us in some way with that.
Absolutely.
Are you guys comfortable with the default provisions? Your risk in the project is your investment?
Yeah, I think we worked through that, yeah. I mean, the only thing that we would have, if we defaulted, I agree, payments are, that would be forfeited, payments already made, but personal property or, personal improvements we would take from the building.
Okay. What about the kitchen
that what
equipment, the
we agreed upon?
$100,000 of kitchen equipment
That's part of the development stays.
of the building? Right.
If it's built into the building, it stays. If there's something loose like
All the kitchen equipment stays, all of it. Everything that's in the agreement of the $110,000 stays.
Just the furniture and
The things that aren't in this,
alcohol or whatever you have, okay.
your cash register systems, the furniture, these types of things, inventory that they would have would come back.
Okay,
Well,
all right.
yeah, I mean, something along those lines. But Christian's right. I mean, there is risk involved, and we're taking a risk. You're taking a risk. And during these 5 years, obviously, we anticipate smooth sailing and no breach. But again, we have to think about what happens with a breach. And again, like Christian said, a restaurateur would take full risk, and with a lane sale contract, you would take full risk. You get to the 4 years and 364th day, and if you default on a residential lane sale contract, you're just out of luck.
Oh, I understand.
And they keep all your money, and they keep the house, and you're on the curb. And the other element to consider is if they default at year 3, then we still haven't been repaid the entire original amount. So we would need to figure out a way to either accelerate that repayment and then give them credit in some way for
But
the equity.
they're gonna have a personal guarantee.
Sure, but yeah, exactly. And Rezo Engineering's guaranteeing this. But
Well, I think in the land sale contract, we would put in there that you would be able to get damages if there was a default. For instance, in year 3, the redevelopment commission would be able to, obviously to file an eviction or a foreclosure, and then also get damages for any missed payments or delinquent payments under that loan. So we would agree to that.
All right, here's what I'm gonna ask. That you two gentlemen get together and get something put together that they can take to the state while they're doing the design. And as soon as that's completed, you have an agreement signed, okay? So that you can submit that to the state, get your final approval, and get started on construction. Because they can't even turn a screw until they get that state permit back, legally. Okay.
So we can agree, both sides can agree in principle to what we've discussed, subject to reducing all of that to writing and having it come back and presented for signatures.
Can you get that done in 2 days?
Oh, sure. 15 minutes, Mel.
10 minutes, maybe.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm gonna ask for a motion that the agreement be put together as quickly as possible by the two attorneys, based on what we have agreed to and discussed this evening, so that the engineering company can submit the plans. You have to get busy on the plans to the state, so they can get started on the project and have it completed by as soon as possible.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just since we don't duplicate too much, I don't want to start completely from scratch when we move on to the next agreement. I mean, those are generally the types of things that we're going to discuss with the next agreement too. And then besides the Exhibit A as the project design, we just need basic financials from the entities. The final designs, if Mr. Stroud is comfortable, in the same way that the Rezos are, would be subject to final approval steering committee in that same kind of paradigm.
Yeah.
So that we don't duplicate a lot of things with the next presentation.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, and guys, while he's coming up,
Hold on.
yes, sir.
You've got to say something real quick.
Are you
It's a
got
recess.
to use the restroom?
I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess.
It's usually 30 days at stake.
30 days. So once the two lawyers hash it out, send it up to the state, 30 days.
They made enough commitment. That's been hard.
Say that again.
They've been hard decisions tonight. Right. Enough Because if he canceled that, I would call it better almost totally. We agree to those basic. God, it's when we get down to deciphering the 220, it might be 130 or 136 or 500. Depends on what project.
Al did make it clear.
Well, I think in terms of equipment is used for a little bit of Mike and I discovered this one time. Things equipment doesn't go anywhere. So everything is already nailed to the rubber.
Hair change, that's
You know, haven't figured the 30,000. Just say 5 years. Hey, you survived that? You know what you just survived? I got to put on my glasses. Did you get sued? No. I got to it's falling down. That's what caused it. I'm saying, I'm not saying you put me on that, but you got all kinds of side effects. I tell you to pray more, but I know you already do. Yeah, I'm not taking that. Yeah, I bought it, and then I got that after. It's like one of those commercials that they tell you all these side effects and say, hell, I barely had a cigarette. I think I'm about to keep it. You know, I can sit in my pants or I can have headaches. Saturday Night Live has a great spoof.
So, Strauss Roadhouse property. Is that food?
Yeah.
Like in a restaurant?
Yeah.
Sit-down restaurant?
Yeah. It's the theme right now.
Holy shit, Kelly.
Historic preservation. And yeah, landmarks dictate a lot of Strauss. I mean, his hair down. They've already indicated. I told them, they're all connected.
You had me there.
So, anyway, Mike, no, I appreciate you guys too. It's a big deal.
Well, there's nobody. This is how I found out.
the meeting back to order as soon as everyone's seated.
Your Honor, if it pleases the commission, one of the things that we didn't cover, and Mr. Schneider brought it up, and I appreciate that, is the property tax. So many communities do, they can artificially generate a tax and pay a COID, or they can pay a tax that's in lieu of the fact that these properties are exempt from tax. I talked to the assessor before the meeting day. They wouldn't give us a guesstimation on a $440,000 property. So I pulled some comps. I looked at Beebs and Bubs. I looked at Brickyard. I looked at Strong's before he bought it and just what their yearly tax was. And then I talked to Mike during the break. I think it might be appropriate then to just get evaluation for what a typical tax responsibility would be, and then add that to their monthly payments, and we could agree to that based on comps, or our best way to kind of assess that. Just to give you an idea, the average that I saw was about $6,000 a year for property, for restaurant property. So that's what it would be, and it's ad valorem, so the city, sans TIF, would get 24 cents on the dollar of that $6,000, so we could also look at what it would be, and then they would be paying essentially the same as property tax.
Okay. Tony, we're gonna give you 5 minutes to agree to everything.
Mine's gonna be quick. Good evening. All right, I heard what everything's been said. I kind of have gone through this. Originally, I came in here, said I'm a buyer, I'm a developer. My business model has never changed. I said from the beginning, if you're not looking for a buyer, I'm not the right guy. My business model is such where we cut it up into individual units, we resell the white box, and then manage the property. Under the current land contract that you guys kind of proposed, or sale, or whatever this agreement says, it just doesn't work for that existing business model. Now, I spoke with Mr. Smart here, and he said that maybe we can look at this a different way. Maybe it goes down to me being a project manager or an owner of some sort, and I buy this building back when it's done, when I complete this building with your money, not mine. We're talking, this project in total is an 8,000 square foot building that's structurally not stable now. It's been vacant for 20 years, you all know that. So just the structural part is gonna be close to 400,000. When I could be more, now we're talking about the north and south wall, and it is in the last bit of engineering that the city has done. So I don't know if anybody's seen that, but they're requiring more piers and more grade beam. So if I was to switch to something of that sort, I wouldn't be opposed, but I can't put up $1 million of my own money with the chance that this same exact board is gonna be sitting here 5 years down the road and somebody's not gonna like a color on the wall or one of the tenants upstairs. It's too much money for me to risk on a project that way, on an assurance that maybe we'll transfer it to you. Now, there's a lot of things in this agreement that says we like, we don't like it. One of the things, the deadline, and I know we spoke about this, you spoke about that with him. The building that I'm doing is completely different than any of the buildings you have down there. Just the structure is gonna take us till the end of the year, or they're close, just to get it up and stabilized and all that. So there's no way we could ever stick to that time frame. Now, I would like to do this project. I just can't do it in the capacity that I think you're asking me to do. So I don't want to turn it down, but I would like to go one way or another. If the board chooses not to sell it, to me and wants to control every fashion, then we can up our number. I'll be your project manager or your partner, however we can work that out attorney-wise. I'm just not willing to write a check for $1 million+ and be in this thing with,
What's your estimate, Tony, on,
to completion with people living, moving in,
with
full build out?
framed out the way that you want office space or residential space? What's your estimate?
I think we're about $1 million. I'm thinking we can do that thing around $1.6 million. It's fully built out. Now, building's 8,000 square feet. Current, say, first floor space would be $300 a square foot. I think we can do the second floor for $200. There's already some structure there, but there's not a lot. I mean, we're changing a lot around. So if we really watch our numbers, and, you know, I don't have any fees in there, I still think we're gonna be at $1.6 million finished. And when I came to the board originally, I asked for $285,000 for the wall, which was $1,000 less than what your estimates you had already looked at for putting a Band-Aid on that wall, bolting it together and slapping a coat of stucco. And I knew that I was gonna be in it quite a bit more money. But I felt that if I was a buyer, I was willing to take the chance.
Well, and that's kind of what these projects are, and because your project and the Rezo project, one way I look at them is, you know, with the Rezo project, we're paying half or, you know, a percentage, but that's not the way I look at them. And I'm super conservative. You know, we've been to other redevelopment communities where they say no contribution on retail or commercial, but again, we bought these properties, and when we did that, we committed to, I think, investing in them and fixing the wall, you know, doing the things that we're paying for in the firehouse were things we were going to have to do anyway. So that, I don't look at it as the city's giving someone money. They're putting money into our property that we own. And that's an important distinction because, again, we're a different city now than we were even 4 years ago.
No, I agree with that. And hopefully the park will draw them in. And, you know, all these things are great things, or else I wouldn't be standing here today. But the fact of the matter is, this particular building has been sitting vacant for 20 years. And 20 years ago, it was structurally unstable, and it's not getting any better. So a lot of the things that, you know, we're proposing is completely different than what I think anybody else has ever proposed before.
May I make a comment, please?
Sure.
Just so everybody kind of knows where we're at. Again, we have, what we're talking about is, from the city perspective, you know, our interest in protecting our investment in our property, and that's something that Mr. Stroud's having a little more trouble with than the Rezo group did. But financially, we had roughly committed to $285,000 to fix the wall because it just needs
Looks
it.
bad, yeah.
Right, and an additional $250 to the build out. So we have, you know, not committed to, but fundamentally walking down the path of a $535,000 commitment to this property. Mr. Stroud's investment in was $250 plus whatever it turned out to be.
Correct.
And
now that was only
first
the
floor.
CO to
The first
for half
floor.
of the first floor
To
and the
accommodate-
exterior.
to
Correct.
accommodate the
Now since then we've
interaction.
had some
Right.
other engineering, plus we've have a retaining wall to the row houses next door that I think really needs to be addressed one way or another through it's you guys or me. I don't think the homeowner should eat that price.
Let me ask you another question. To get the structure in rehabable condition, okay, what would your guesstimate on that be?
I was saying from the beginning, the $780,000, and that would get us to the white box stage for the tenant to take over and handle their build out on the first floor only. Now that, at that point, we have to have a second means of egress, depending on what we're doing, whether it's an elevator or stairwell, you know, all that can drive the price up. But for the initial rendering I gave you, I felt pretty comfortable at 780. Not a completed building, but a CO for one side of the restaurant to get it opened by the end of the year.
I'm just talking about to get it stable, period.
Well, we talked about the west wall, and we kind of think that's gonna be around 400,000, and I think there's an additional 75,000 in the north and south wall now. I think there was, do you remember looking at the diagram? I think there was
looking.
2 grade beams in the basement and an additional 4 posts and then some cross bracing. So I would say another 75,000 on it.
So that's a total of?
475, and I think the retaining wall to the rear of the property needs to be addressed somehow, one way or another.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
If, just for instance,
Okay.
if we would say, okay, Tony, we want to hire you to do that, manage that project, get that part completed, then we would come up with an agreement to sell the building to Tony. How would we maintain control of what Tony puts in there?
Well, one thing, when Tony gets the building and cuts it up into condos, into 6, 8, 9, 10 condos.
About the bottom floor.
The bottom floor, the restaurant.
The park, yes.
The restaurant's gonna be the same way. That will be, we know what's going in there now, or are proposed going in there now. But that unit would also be a condo unit, a business condo unit. And once that unit is sold, now if I maintain it, as long as I maintain it, or there could be deed restrictions on that to go along with the nuisance order, or, you know, no strip clubs or whatever you want in those restricted covenants, that wouldn't be a problem. We could work on those so that that would be right in the deed. But my whole pitch from the very beginning was to get more home ownership and more business ownership in those. So
I understand that.
So once that's sold,
We're talking about what we have to protect, Tony, in my mind.
mm-hmm,
We have a $6 million plus project.
correct.
Right there, okay? We have to protect what goes in that area right there,
I totally agree.
okay? So how would we do that?
Well, if I may jump in, historic landmarks will have significant participation in your I've made you aware of that.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah, I think what Mel's asking, and what some communities like Fishers, what their redevelopment does is when they invest in a building like that with retail on the bottom, commercial second floor, condos on the third floor, what they do is they invest, they partner in the construction, and then they get either a lease back or some kind of ownership over part of it. So hypothetically, if we could find a mutually beneficial ground, he could build the whole thing and then sell us back just the condo that has the restaurant that
Right.
touches the park.
Or lease it back to
Or
you.
lease it back.
I'll build it and lease it back to you. You could have a first right of refusal. If you don't like my tenant, I come to you, we'll scratch out a number, and we can preset all that from the beginning.
So Fishers, what they do, they've got these really nice buildings around their city hall, and they say, we paid part of it, so if we ever have business that comes to town that we like, you have to let us put it in there, and it's a pre-negotiated rent. It's a rent that's already fixed, and that's what they get in exchange for their contribution. So
Yeah, and I would be fine with that, and we could put that right in any kind of restricted covenants that you want. I think that would hold up, wouldn't it? Yep. We had actually talked about that a while back, so.
with Tony's agreement, I mean, I think we just need to talk more in public and offline and back to public. I think there's just a little bit more, but I think there's a really good potential there, and we can find a middle ground.
Because I want to work with the city. I do, and you guys have all been good to me. It's just a process that I'm just not used to. So when I take a risk, I expect a reward. If there's a reward five years down, I don't know what things will be worth 5 years down the road. Hopefully this park draws in a bunch of people and a bunch of new restaurants spring up, and the building's worth more. If I had to go off of today's numbers, I would say that building's not worth a whole lot. Even we'll sink $1.5 million, $6 million into the building. I still don't think that building's probably going to be worth more than $600,000. Now I could be wrong. I'm not an appraiser, but just seeing what's selling around it, done and finished buildings, I do think this would be a landmark building. But you gotta remember, if we're putting $500,000 just into structure of this building, that's dead money. That's just gone. So.
Well, and it's a good point, and that's why, and I know some people, and I don't disagree necessarily totally, feel that we should have been way farther down the process than we are now, and that's a fair point. But I would argue that we're exactly where we need to be when we need to be there, because so many changes are going to take place just by having this park open that first year. We're going to have more interest, we're going to have more opportunity, things are going to increase in value. So I mean, I would look at it that way.
And I do. That's why I'm here. That's why I was willing and still am and very excited about this. I just feel like there's a few stumbling blocks, and a lot of it is it's purely dollars and cents. It's a lot of money. I mean, I'm asking you for a lot. I'm going to be putting up a lot. The only, when I came to you, how I saw being able to recoup some of this money from the beginning is selling off those condos and cutting it up and making that space where we had more ownership and it was back on tax roll. And I know that's a lot different than what a lot of people are doing here, but in the city and other places, it's very common. So, I don't want to rule anything out because I want to do this, but under this land sale or promise to give me this down the road, it's too much money for me to lay out. But I would be willing to partner. I would be able to, willing to do that. Or we do the direct sale and we put the covenants in with the lease back, something to that effect. I just don't know which way. There's no use in us bouncing agreements back and forth if I get some feedback and you guys can say, oh yeah, we can make this work. I would love to be able to do that.
And if I may add, I'm assuming that we can assure that any investment we make is in construction and paid to the completion of the project. So we just need to make sure that our investment is going into
and there would exactly
not
into
the project.
That's going to be
however we figure that out. I would ask for
whether
that.
it's paid to subs, whether it's paid to me. I'm not as concerned with that.
Okay.
It's every dollar I put in, I want back some, same way you guys do. We want a great park, we want a great restaurant, and great other things around there. We want to make our money work for us. So
I just need to make sure that hopefully that element can be in, if we continue down this path, that our money paid out of our city RDC bank account goes to actual construction costs as they occur.
Okay, let me make a suggestion.
Okay.
That Mr. Smart, and Mr. Weldon get together, along with you and Mr. Messmore and...
Do I have to get together with Mr. Messmore?
Buddy, I'm on your side.
and come up with some sort of a outline of an agreement that this board can discuss.
Okay.
Instead of this kind
right.
of thing.
That's because that's the way I feel.
Okay.
Like. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah. I mean, you got a great lawyer, and we'll get creative, and I think we can figure something out.
Is there any direction? Do you want to go toward the sale and the cut up with covenants?
I like what we're talking about because, and this is just me, but it seems like, and I'm looking at these folks here. It seems like what we're most concerned about is what goes on that first floor, and especially what's connected to the park. And if we can figure out a way, maybe we partner in building this building and then we get that back or lease that back or have control over just that, then we don't really care that much if it's an accountant in the second floor and people live on the third floor. So we can accomplish your goals and our goals.
Right.
And that's what I think if we get together and we're creative, we can get an outline together pretty quickly.
Okay.
And I feel optimistic about it.
Well, let me ask you guys a question. Okay, because this is the way I feel. I feel that if you're looking at the building, the row house to the right on the park, that is absolutely highest and best use is the restaurant. There's 1,800 square feet there with our outdoor seating. That was another thing we need to ensure we have in here. But the outdoor seating, that is the highest and best use. In between that, the 1,000 square feet in between, we need a buffer between that and the row house, whether that is a day business of some sort, coffee shop, things like that we had discussed. Same way with restrictive covenants in there, you know, daytime hours, shut down early, or residential up to residential because, you know, of the existing residential houses on the other
Well,
side.
I think that's the covenants and the protection that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Like I explained the last meeting, we
Right.
have to protect their money.
No, and I completely understand that, and I'm wanting to protect mine. I mean,
I know you want to protect yours.
yeah, and I understand everybody's here to do a job. So if we could all just work together, and you know, initially I came in thinking that the only way to get this done was be a buyer and put restricted covenants in the deed and cut them up and do resales and get them back on the tax roll. But after kind of going through this process, I see that, you know, there are other ways of thinking, and if that's the way you guys want to proceed
Well,
too, I'm not shutting the door on it.
What I'm asking is that you four gentlemen get together,
Okay.
okay? I'd like to be included in the loop on that.
Okay.
All right? And we have something put together that this board can chew on
Okay.
at their next regular meeting, or if you get it done before then, we'll call a special meeting,
Okay.
okay?
Sounds good.
Is that, Anthony, is that all right with you? Okay.
Now, conceptually,
Is that okay with the board?
yeah, I'm in agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, but what I wanted to add was conceptually, we're talking about a different structure of a deal that does what we wanted to do in terms of the city's investment.
And I think
What
we
I'm
have to-
missing a little bit of is what that total investment might be, and I think that we need to make sure we have a pretty good number on that
Right.
as a part of this discussion, with maybe some details on at least how those costs break out.
Right.
Just,
And
and I think that's fair.
I think that time is of the essence, so let's
I do
not
too.
play around, because, the more it rains, the more that building weakens.
I agree. I agree.
So,
I started looking at that building 13 months ago, so I know.
and so, to, avoid some sort of a disaster that
Yeah.
none of us want, let's get it, something put together as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Does the board agree with that?
Totally. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, all right.
Was there any particular way you wanted to go? Ownership down the road or
I
restricted
think we-
covenants with
I think-
immediate deed?
Eventually, we want you to own it, because we don't
Okay.
want the darn thing.
Okay.
But we have to put some sort of an agreement together that protects that area next to the park.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll give it a shot.
Because I just make another statement that I've always said, cities don't make good landlords.
There, you are exactly right. Thank you very much.
Is there any more business to come before the board? No. Any comments from the audience? Paul?
So we're clear, we're moving forward with the firehouse deal.
Could you come up here, please?
Yeah, I just make sure we're clear, we're moving forward with the firehouse deal with the Rizzos.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, it went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
So no proposals from actual restaurateurs, so you're not dealing with a third person, third party?
Yep.
Okay, all right. That's all I wanted to know.
Paul?
I read the letter Christian sent out. Very encouraged when I read it, because it shows me somebody else, or, you know, people getting interested. So I wanted to plant a seed tonight, because I would love to have him doing more in the town. What I'd like you guys to think about is you know, these aren't the only two things we got. We're committed to a lot around there. So what I would encourage you to do, because you've been doing a fantastic job, is I would like to see him come in and make a proposal, or have work with Brian. We've got a burnout lot right next door to him. If he's looking to partner up with this place, something can be done right beside it, they could combine, or we've got a lot on a corner. I know it would be something that could be thought about, and I just want to plant a seed. I don't want him walking away thinking that we don't want him, because he's done a great job. So that would be just a little word of encouragement there.
I think this board, Paul, and I appreciate your comments, I think this board is open to any suggestions for any of the properties that we have, that we own. So, no further business and no comments. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
My motion?
I'll second his motion.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
I've been having so much fun, and here he runs.
Meeting adjourned.
Sorry, Mr. Seymour.